She'd file a police report if he asked for money again. They kept asking, cause it wasn't true.
I'm
She
always
awkwardly
ready.
joined us for Christmas, and punched my brother in the face during the meal for humiliating her oldest son by asking him if he wanted to work at my brother's company for good pay. Her oldest son is in and out of jail, and my brother was trying to help him after his release, but her son said he didn't want a job and got mad. She then called the cops and told them the same brother had illegal guns in his truck, and they came on Christmas night and searched his truck. No guns found. Needless to say, she is not welcome anywhere near any of us, and my mom still cries about it, but refuses to talk to her again. I was a kid and my sister was much older when my parents were finally done with her. From my recollection, she went through the cycle of making one stupid decision after another, even when they would tell her and show her why she shouldn't make that decision. Dropped out of college, they were paying for, and used the tuition money she was refunded to buy a Firebird, then quit her job. Let car run out of oil, kept driving it until the engine seized up. Parents bailed her out again, buying her what they could afford on one salary, a decent, used station wagon. Only catch, she'd take the job my dad called in favors for. Parents come home one day to find strange car in driveway, a Sunbird. It was old and rusty, but it was a one-to-one trade my sister managed to swing on the station wagon. Lo and behold, old and rusty car breaks down almost immediately and she simply stops showing up to work, gets fired. Moves out with no car and no job, accusing parents of controlling her life. Moves back in 3 months later. Upset that I have moved into her old bedroom, which is bigger, demands to be moved back into the bigger bedroom. Parents say no, she threatens to move out. She goes on a semi-hunger strike about the bedroom.
As a dutiful
Turns
maid
out she
woman.
was shoplifting and stockpiling candy to eat so she wouldn't have to eat with the rest of the family. During this time, dates a number of less than stellar boyfriends, including a guy who is 30 years older, but drives a Porsche, a guy who had been convicted of sexual abuse, and another guy who generally creeps everyone out by jumping the fence and just standing in the backyard at all hours of the night. Eventually, she is told to pay rent, go to college, or move out. She chooses to move out, and is gone by the end of the week. I clearly
Freeze
remember
to the
her
core.
threatening to burn the house down as
Rack
she
and ruin.
left. 2
You
months
can't
later, she asks to move back in because her roommate and best friend kicked her out. Parents say no, she's on her own unless she wants to go to college or get a job and keep it.
I
Car breaks
condemn
down
you.
again, for good, and calls and asks parents if they can buy a new
More
one
speed.
for her. Not new as in new to her. New as in brand new model
Punishment.
year. My parents'
You can't
newest
run.
car was 15 years old at the time. They say no, and not to call again. There were a whole raft
Take
of other things too, including
Rack and
forgetting
ruin.
to pick up her grandmother from doctor's appointments, generally loading the existence of the rest of her family. And, then, ironically, deriding the family as rednecks when she finally managed to hook a
Eye
guy
for
who
an
was a
eye.
small business owner and actually had some money.
More speed.
Anywho, it's been about 20 years since I've spoken to her, and, from the stuff I hear now and again through the pipeline, I'm better for it. I do expect
I
her to come
condemn you.
calling when my parents pass and she finds out I'm the Solaire. My ex-wife disowned my son. We both married young when I was in the military, high school sweethearts. She became pregnant 6 months into our marriage.
Blood of
I don't
frost.
think she connected with him at all after
Rack
he
and
was
ruin.
born. The most she did with him was Instagram photo shoots where she painted herself as #1 mommy. When he turned 3, I left the military. A year after that, she ran for the hills.
I condemn you.
I remember it like it was yesterday.
Eye for an eye.
I sat down with her at a local restaurant to talk divorce plans. We split all of our financials and material items down the middle. We finally got to custody for my kiddo, something I dreaded to
and ruin.
discuss because fathers never gain custody in my area, and she tells me I want absolutely no responsibility. I was taken back and I asked if she was sure. She was.
Lights out.
That one sentence hurt me more than anything else that happened during that time.
To ashes.
My biological father
Time to
wanted
clean
nothing to do with me, and now
I
I'm
must
seeing
leave
it
no
happen
stone
with my own
unturned.
child, but with his mother. I received full custody and she married within a year afterwards. She had another child
Freeze
too.
to the core.
Her parents tried their best to be a part of his life, but she still does her best to avoid him. He's 7 now and used to it, but I know it weighs heavily on him. It sucks, but it's
Take
life I guess.
this. Eye for an eye.
Not my kid, but my
Rack and
sister
ruin.
I raised for several years. I was a senior in high school when my parents had my sister, completely unexpected. They were 58 and 55. I never really got to know
More
her
speed.
much as
I
I went away
condemn
to
you.
college when she was 5 months old, and was in the Air Force by the time she was 1.5. I saw her twice on leave, and got pics, but the way life was working out we never really got time together. Fast forward, our dad dies when she is 2, and our stepmother is raising her. She was a terrible parent, like the kind that saw one of her kids run away at 16 to halfway across the country, another run away at 15 and get married, and one that is just a loon who spent his life bouncing around whatever hot NLM program was out there as a career. She also convinced my dad to send me to a pray away the gay camp in TN when I was 15. So when my sister was 11 and begging for help, I took leave and went to her. Surprisingly, our stepmonster was happy to get attorneys to draw up the paperwork for me to become my sister's guardian, and even pay for it. So I'm raising my sister and things are okay until she is about 14. Then I caught her doing these videos online talking dirty, trying to get guys to jerk off. So that was a mess of trying to get those down and suing the people that hired her to do them. Ran away for a week, hiding out at a friend's house, found her when she was caught shoplifting. AB&D charge at 14, trying to steal the phone of a boy she was dating to say if he was talking to other girls. It happened on base and I managed to talk it out of being a bigger thing. A second B&D charge with friends breaking into the NCO club to try to steal beer. I was told I had to leave base housing at that point. My security clearance was suspended to make sure she wasn't putting me in a position I could be compromised. Still 14, arrested with a stolen military ID trying to get into a bar. 15 escapes rehab. 15 escapes rehab again. 16 things seem good and she is taking school seriously. At 18 she was accepted to RISD, graduated with honors, and had an actual decent paying job with a web company with benefits and everything. Started getting stoned a lot, lost her job. Sold her car to pay bills. Lost her apartment, still hadn't bothered looking for work. Got her trust fund at 24, blew over $400,000 in 2 years, nothing to show for it. Had multiple cases against her for drugs. Was restricted to the state, but decided to go follow fish around anyway in Somali. Got picked up for hooking and possession out of state, was returned to where she was detained and somehow released pending trial yet again. While awaiting trial she was caught holding enough package for sale heroin to qualify as a distribution charge. By then, I hadn't heard from her for almost 7 years, and only managed to keep up with her reading the police blotter from the occasional attorney that she had contacted me to verify I would pick up her legal tab. I wouldn't. Against any logic, she was out of prison in under 3 years. I heard she dinned a bunch of people out to make it happen. She showed up at my house, asking for a place to stay. I said I couldn't have her in my house, but I'd get her a place for the night and then help her locate a place of her own. That night she broke into my house, nearly got shot by me while doing it, and tried to spin some story that she was looking for something she dropped in my house earlier that day, despite never actually entering my house. I told her she had to go. She threatened she would call DCFS and tell them I was abusing my kids if I didn't go with her to an ATM and give her all the money I could withdraw. Told her to get the hell out before I exercised the castle defense law and dropped her. Took out a restraining order the next day, and in doing so found she once again left state when she wasn't supposed to have and violated her parole, so back to the clink. Since then she's been dead to me. Disowned my stepbrother because he ended up being caught in a pedo sting. He was caught in a giant sting, and was charged for having kiddie porn as well as breaking into teen girls' emails to find lewd pictures, to blackmail them into having sex with him. He was 21 when he was caught. The most messed up part was that a couple years before he was caught he had broken into my email and done the same thing, tried to blackmail me into giving him more pictures. I was able to get him to keep his mouth shut because the pictures he found of me were from me when I was 15, and I threatened to go to the cops to charge him with child pornography. That shut him up real quick, probably because he knew they'd find whatever else he was hiding. I wish I had gone to the cops, because maybe I could have prevented him from harming those other girls. But I honestly had no idea about the extent of it. I thought he was just being a supreme creep to me personally. The SWAT team ended up raiding our house, waking up my dad with guns in his face and forcing him to sit outside in his boxers while they searched. My brother is serving 18 years. He tried to send me a few letters, with some BS apology. I told him to leave me the hell alone and haven't talked to him since. My family disowned me because I disowned my mother. I was sexually groomed, abused and tortured by her husband for years, and when I finally told her, she not only didn't believe me, but stayed married to him for 7 years. I had to move out at 16 to get away from how I was being treated. Then when I finally began speaking to others, she started to cover her butt with her social circle by telling them that I seduced her husband. I cut her off for years, and didn't ever want to see her again, but my family bullied me to just get over it and have a relationship with my mother, and that I was hurting her. Even my sister, who knew what happened, knew I stayed for so long to protect her, fell into a trap of my mother whining to everyone around her and painting me as a liar. About 4 years ago she was very suddenly diagnosed with advanced cancer and didn't have much time. I was moving out of my home state and everyone told me I needed to see her before I left, that I needed to be there, but I didn't want to. In the end everyone turned their back on me. They were so mad I wouldn't just forget my trauma just to say goodbye to someone I hadn't loved for a long time, and rightly so. My mother and her sister were both adopted into a great family. Recently, my grandfather fell ill and we were told to prepare to say goodbye. So the family gathered. My grandmother has had a hard time with her memory since she had a brain hemorrhage, but she welcomed my aunt into her home during this tough time. Whilst my grandfather was in his final week, Wendy, aunt, took my grandmother's ATM card and proceeded to spend well over $1,000 on herself and get herself a motel room. She also attempted to steal their car. When my uncles found out, she basically disappeared into the wind. After my grandfather passed and his funeral was all sorted, my grandmother went to an attorney to write Wendy out of any inheritance she would get from their estate when she passes. She didn't press any formal charges, because the whole process would have been lengthy and more painful for her. She didn't need the extra stress. I'm pretty sure one of my uncles also threatened Wendy to make sure she stayed away from my grandmother from now on too. I wouldn't say I've disowned or stopped loving my son, but it's real tough to find love for him. He's almost 14, next month, and he's currently out of our home at a treatment facility. He's averaged 2 arrests a year for the last 2 years, and he's attacked my wife several times, our daughters several times, and the neighborhood kids several times. He's run away from school, run away from home, and tried to push me off the roof of our house, after threatening to jump off and hurt himself. We have become that family in our town where the police are called to our home on a semi-regular basis. He's been getting more violent as he gets older, not to mention bigger and stronger, and I honestly don't see an end in sight. The key fact I'm leaving out is that he's been diagnosed as high-functioning autistic and is also bipolar. That's like putting walls around a tornado and expecting it to stay inside the walls. A lot of what has occurred he had little control over because of the way his mind is, where he's constantly at war with himself, structure versus chaos, and my wife and I have tried desperately to give him the best life we can, while keeping ourselves and our daughters safe, but I'm tired. It's been 8.5 years we've been going through this with him and I've been ready to throw in the towel on him for a while. But my wife refuses to let him go, so we wake up every morning trying to give him the best life for him and our girls. I've disowned one of my siblings, still have 5 other siblings. My sister is just a horrible person. She's the youngest of the 7, and she's been rotten since she was a teenager. She is much younger than the rest of us, so while the other 6 grew up together, she was almost like an only child. She treats everybody in her life like they're here to serve her needs. Some of the things she's put our mother through are truly horrible. I wouldn't care if she disappeared forever. I am not sure if this counts. I didn't disown him, but I went through a dissociative episode after some really intense trauma, and I honestly couldn't feel any attachment and parental love that I had for my son. I tried not to show it, and behave as normally as possible because he was a child at the time and couldn't possibly understand what I was going through. It was pretty disturbing to not be able to feel any sense of bond with him. I eventually got better, but I definitely did not feel what I or most people would call love for him. My mother was disowned by her parents for her interracial relationship. We are from the South, Arkansas. There are parts of this that are weird too. My mother initially lied to her parents and said she was dating an Arab man. This was fine, but they found out she was lying, leading to her being disowned. I guess in the early 70s Arabs were okay but blacks were no-nos. They disowned my mom, but it was fine if we came over. My older sister was close with them, but me and my younger sister always felt weird going over there. They adored my older sister though, and she stayed over and went on vacation with them among other things. I remember asking my grandfather why he didn't like my mother when I was about 8 or 9 years old at a cousin's birthday party. He just walked away. These same people who essentially pushed her out of their lives were the same ones she took care of and comforted in their darkest times. She sort of went back to them and they didn't push her away for what I am assuming is they knew the end was near and they were trying to right their wrongs. I have no idea, just an assumption. She was there with them until their ends though. My mom might not be perfect, but damn, that made me look at her in a completely different light. I have 4 grown children. One of my children, I'll call her Amber, has mental health problems. I would say that her behavior makes it very difficult to love her.
If you
Her
ever...
siblings want nothing to do with her. But Amber thinks she is perfectly sane and everyone else in the family is crazy and evil. She also thinks she is superior to us all and will one day be rich and famous. She is currently on welfare. No one else in the family has ever been on welfare. The other day she came over to our house. She sat down and spent about 30 minutes telling us that we had starved and abused her when she was a child. Not true. That we are horrible people. She claims that her father sexually abused her. Not true. She told me, I'm her mother, that I am a pedophile because I blew a kiss to my 3-year-old grandchild. Amber has 3 children and claims we have sexually abused them. Not true. We love these 3 girls very much, but currently Amber will not let us see them and is probably telling them bad things about us. It is heartbreaking. After Amber had yelled at us for a while, she told us that if we don't confess to the abuse we have done, then we can have no contact with her or her children. On her way out, she grabbed a bottle of our scotch and said it was not fair that we had a bunch of expensive scotch when she didn't. My husband collects different types of scotch and drinks it very moderately. She took the scotch. During this visit we noticed that Amber has lost a lot of weight and looks almost anorexic. Amber also accused her husband of being a pedophile, and forced him to confessing to having thoughts of pedophilia. Because Amber is involved with social services, they found out about Amber's accusations and her husband was unable to be alone with his kids for about a year, until he convinced them he was not a pedophile. Amber has been hospitalized once for mental problems, but never got diagnosed. Her children were put in a foster home for 3 months because she was physically attacking them, hitting, scratching, etc. in front of the kids. We were able to get the kids back, but it took a $5,000 legal bill in 3 months. There is so much more craziness. She has currently started having a relationship with a man who lives near her. By the way, her husband is still with her. Apparently the man from down the street is also staying with them and the kids. We are just praying she is using birth control. She seems to get especially crazy after having a baby, though her youngest is currently 2. She also asserts that both my husband and I were sexually abused by our fathers. Not true. She claims there is a family curse. She seems to really believe this. She sent us a text message last night reiterating the no contact unless we confess. At this point we are quite relieved that she wants no contact. Her disgusting accusations have cast a pall over our love for her, and even our love for her children. We feel we need to withdraw from her family completely to avoid any more pain. But we would be there to help her grandkids in a heartbeat if there was an opportunity. My older brother is the disowned child. He has been a petty crook as long as I could remember, into hard drugs since his pre-teens, and pretty much a full-blown sociopath. He treated every girl in his life like me. I remember him as a teenager calling his girlfriend a slut because she didn't want to blow him. When he knocked some chick up years later, he had a daughter. And one of the first things out of his mouth in the hospital after her birth was she's gonna grow up to be a whore like her mom. Let's just say the child is better off not having him as a father figure. She's been adopted since then and is living a happy childhood last time I checked. He treated my parents like trash. He would be in and out of jail and they would take him in whenever he was out. Then he'd find a job, lose it, and go back to jail. Rinse and repeat. He would get in physical fights with my mom, dad, me. He'd kick our dogs, cats, etc. We'd have to get new drywall to replace the holes he punched through those walls. He'd have freakouts and smash things all around the house. Living with him was a nightmare. The last straw was him walking out on his kid and her mother, and starting a gang fight at our house over a drug deal gone wrong. Things got really violent and I'm pretty sure weapons were involved. He left the house, and on that very same night, he came back because he needed a place to stay. When my dad said no, he started fighting my dad. I stepped in at that point and almost beat the hell out of him. No one messes with my dad, no one. It ended with my dad having to hold me down to stop me from killing him, and my brother walking away down the street yelling obscenities. Haven't seen him since. This was 6 years ago. At this point, he's either in jail or dead. I may have every reason in the world to hate him for everything he's done, but I don't. He's a tortured soul who has let his demons get the absolute best of him, plain and simple. I just hope that he finds some kind of peace, even if it takes death for him to do so. Bill, if you're reading this, you're my brother and I still love you, and I hope you're okay, wherever you are. A little different, I was disowned, but I deserved it. I was an addict and a mess for a long time. My mom couldn't keep bailing me out of trouble and watch me self-destruct anymore. I wasn't living at home. She came to see me one last time to tell me she was done, not to contact her. She would no longer have anything to do with me. She was in pieces. I can't imagine how hard it must have been for her. But it was the best thing she ever did for me. Once she cut me off, my rock bottom came hard and fast. After a little while of living on the streets and my addiction consuming me, I made my way to a detox center, got a few days clean under my belt and never looked back. That was almost 15 years ago. After I was clean a little while, I contacted my mom, and little by little we built a relationship again, and now we're really close. I am forever grateful to my mom for letting me fall and letting me back into her life. My biological father divorced my mom and also his 3 kids, basically bouncing out of our lives and making it clear he wanted next to nothing to do with any of us when he left. Man, years later, at my older sister's funeral, that he had the gall to attend, I asked him why he did that. He said, "I thought it would be easier for everyone." He actually meant it was easier for him to run home to his wealthy family and enjoy a second adolescence while my single mother worked 2 jobs to feed 3 kids under 10 with 0 child support from him. I have been legally disowned by my father. When I was 11, my mom was diagnosed with terminal cancer. This was her second diagnosis in around 4 years. Obviously she recovered the first time after intense surgery and a lot of chemo, and he did not want to look after her like he did before. He also had a new girlfriend and her family to look after apparently, and he had no issues leaving us. When my mom passed away when I was 14, my brother, grandmother, him and I met up to discuss who I was going to live with. The plan was my brother and his family. Father was never considered, and he showed up and declared that he was in the process of going to court to legally emancipate himself from me. He went out of his way to legally declare that I was no longer his child. Just so that my brother, 22-year-old with a wife and 2 young children already struggling on 1 paycheck, couldn't seek child support. Needless to say, it stung, coming only days after my mother's funeral. As Jehovah's Witnesses, my parents disowned my siblings and I several times since I was in my late teens. One of the Jehovah rules is that you do not associate with others who know the truth but refuse to follow it, including family, and parents are encouraged to disown any children who have left the religion. The first time was when I was 19. It upset me. I was heartbroken, and eventually they changed their minds only to do it again a couple years later, and so on, until I stopped caring and no longer attempt to be a part of their lives at all. Not a parent, but my parents stopped loving me the moment I was disfellowshipped as a Jehovah's Witness, and I was promptly kicked out. I knew nothing of how to live on my own at the time, but I had a decent job and survived. My brother stopped associating with them 2 years later and lives with me, and they since moved away, 1,500 miles away to be exact.
Vengeance will
It's
be
easier
mine.
to tell people I'm orphan or that I cannot care, because it's hard to explain how they would stop loving or want to associate with their own son over some stupid cult rules. My father said my mother's issue was she had too many children and it gave her some kind of brain fever, much like a dog that loses its mind after having too many puppies. My mother said my father felt trapped by me. He was planning to leave when it was just my 2 older brother, and then my mother got pregnant with me and he felt obligated to stay. Now that I'm an adult with 2 kids myself, I think I realized that both of my parents are just extremely mentally ill and incapable of loving anyone, including themselves. Thanks for listening to Radio TTS. Hit the subscribe button and leave a like if you enjoyed the video. Share your own stories in the comments below. Have you ever disowned someone? Or have you been disowned?
Teachers of Reddit, what is the most depressing thing a student has told you about their home life? I had a student not come to school for 2 weeks when he finally showed he was limping and his foot was wrapped up in a large dirty ace bandage. I called him to my office after school that day to check in on him. He told me that he had been in the river fishing for his dinner 2 weeks ago and slipped on a rock. He cut his foot so badly that he couldn't walk until today to make it to school. I asked about going to the doctor, but he hadn't seen his parents in so long that he didn't know how to get to them for help getting to the hospital. I called CPS. Got him help, as much as they could offer. We found out he was living in a tent. BC the house had been foreclosed on when his parents disappeared. A bunch of teachers chipped in and got him groceries. Clothes, and
Aristocratic
started
etiquette
driving
is
him
all just
places
for
after
show.
that.
Just
Today,
smile
over
and nod
2
along.
years later, he's working
was
a
forced
job
to
and
learn
one
all
of
of the
our
rules
teachers
by
still
heart.
clothes and feeds him. The student is too prideful to live with anyone and kind of couch hops now. But he's so strong and resilient. He's an incredible human and I think he will change the world one day. School counselor here. My second year I had a courageous student who suffered from a rare, debilitating disease. She didn't have many friends because she was never in school and always in hospitals. She loved reading though. She brought books with her to the hospital. Unfortunately, due to the disease, her eyesight was now deteriorating, and she knew she would eventually go blind. She cried in my office that she would miss her books and didn't want to be alone in the dark. I couldn't help crying with her. She transitioned to audiobooks on her iPod. This was roughly 14 years ago, a time when middle schoolers didn't have smartphones. A year later she passed away. My hope is she's at peace, reading all the books she wants, with other friends she's met. I told a kid I was gonna call his parents because he was acting out in class. His response: if you find them, we know where they're at. Taught at an inner city charter school. Had a bright 6th grade girl who started sleeping during my classes. This was not like that. When I asked after school what was up, she told me that her best 2 younger sisters
Rack and ruin!
and head mom
Eye for an
moved
eye!
into the homeless shelter, and the last time she slept through the night, all their stuff was stolen. This was a
Judgment!
few years ago. This student came into class one day really late and escorted by some official. He threw his bag on the ground and
You
sat in
can't
his
run!
seat frowning. Turns out, the day before he went home and his foster parents had decided they no longer
Leave
wanted
it all
him, so
to
he
me.
went into the care of social services. Everything about this child went downhill from there. I was also in an interview with a mother and her son, and she straight up tells us that she's not
Freeze
concerned
to the
about
core.
her son, as he's not her favorite child.
Rack and ruin!
The defeated look on her
Judgment!
face still tears me up. Got a message today about why a student could not come to class yesterday. Sorry, I couldn't come to class. There were gunshots right outside my apartment and I thought I was going to die. The police would come eventually and I had
Not
to give a
bad.
statement. I will get the work from yesterday done today. Thanks. Yeah, you get that extension. I had a 10-year-old crying and wishing she was dead. Her older
I condemn
brothers
you.
at home were being awful to her. Bullying and hitting her.
You can't run!
Saying I should just let her go so she could kill herself and then she wouldn't be a bother to us or her brothers anymore. Sat her down with the teacher. A cup of tea. Some cookies and talked with her throughout the afternoon. Not much we could do about the brothers. But
Eye
she
for an
left
eye.
with a smile and came back to school the next day with a smile as well. Now I'm just keeping my eye on her in case things go bad again. But so far so good. Apparently talking to us encouraged her to tell her mother about everything that happened. So at least someone at home also kept an eye out for her. A student's mother shows up for the first time in almost a year and she's well dressed and looking like someone
Rack
straight
and
out of
ruin.
a fashion magazine. Had the latest phone,
More speed!
flashy jewelry, overall extensively dressed. The student on the
Judgment.
other hand was always shabbily dressed and once went without a blazer for a week because his parents weren't buying him one. We allowed him to wear his sports jersey in the class, which is normally not allowed, and constantly called the parents
Eye
to
for an
go
eye.
there. She showed the slightest possible interest in her child, telling us to make him study however we wanted and even hinted hitting him if he didn't behave. A lot of talking and counseling later, it turned out that the student was actually from a well-to-do family. But the parents didn't get along well. Father went out on business trips for weeks together where he was having multiple affairs and the mother was doing the same at home. It was an open secret. The child acted weird just to get some attention in school which he wasn't getting at home. I really felt for the child. He was 11 at the time. A few weeks ago one of my online kids had a band-aid on her left temple, so I asked what happened. She said my mom was angry with me and threw a pencil and it stuck in my head with blood. My mum is an English teacher and
Rack and
once
ruin.
told me about her child, 13 years.
You can't run!
Committed suicide a few years ago. In a creative writing task a few years after it happened, the question revolves around finding out a secret. The boy then wrote a descriptive piece about finding a body hanging in his front room.
I condemn you!
Swinging. Heartbreaking stuff. He had his counselors up and said he just wrote it from the heart. Poor guy. I had a girl playing with something while sitting at the carpet, rolling it back and forth and putting it in her mouth and taking it out and rolling it around again. I told her to give it to me when the other students started their independent work. She gave me this large green pill. At recess I ask her about it and she says her mom and dad give her and her siblings one of these every night to make them sleep. I take the pill to admin and tell them what she told me before searching Google images to find
for
out
an eye.
what it could be.
Yeah!
I find a short
What a
list and go
nuisance.
back to it
Life.
and I'm told it isn't my job to worry about.
To ashes!
I try several
As a
times
dutiful
that they
maid
can get
would.
answers and they say they think it's none of
Blood
them
of
and
frost.
so stop overstepping my face. This girl
I condemn you.
are in and out of foster care and come to school with no food and filthy clothes. She came to school in a sweatshirt covered in dried blood 3 days in a row. Her parents wouldn't even sign the papers to get the kids the free school lunches.
Judgment!
I bought the mom's signature every month.
Rack and ruin!
My mom taught in a very low-income school and every year would go to the dollar store and pick up Christmas presents for all of her students. She knew that many of them didn't get any other gifts for the holiday. She also had stories about how they needed to be careful when constructing standardized tests because there were students who might answer a question like what
You
do
can't
do
run.
when you're hungry would go. But all similar things. A female university student in China told me her mother
Eye for
tried
an
to
eye.
sell her for $8 as a baby.
Judgment!
I don't want to give out too many details, but I've had to fill out 4 CPS reports in my 4 years of teaching. 3-4 students that either confided in me or had signs that they were being physically abused and one that was sexual abuse from the child's father. It's honestly the worst part of the job. Having to hear and see just the awfulness some kids have to go through. It was my first year teaching and the holidays were approaching. A 2nd grade student asked my why Santa visits everyone else's home, but skips hers. On Christmas Eve, my father and I played Santa. We dropped off gifts at their home for each child, with of course the permission of the legal guardian's parents were in jail. His parents would only give him a pillow and blankets for his bed if he had all days. I contacted the school counselor and it was true. Along with the fact that all of the food was locked away and he was only given specific amounts per day. But ECFS, this was not considered abuse. I made a deal with him that as long as he was doing his best, his grade would never drop below an A. Eat it up. Every week, I'd let students earn raffle tickets which would potentially allow them to choose a prize, such as bringing in a show and tell or picking a prize from my treasure chest. Anyways, one day, a student brings in her favorite doll. This led all the girls to start talking about their favorite dolls. One student privately tells me that she never had a doll before. This made sense because the child was homeless, wore the same dirty outfit nearly every day, often stole from teachers and classmates because she became adapted to survival of the fittest mode, and her parents were out of the picture. That night I went to Toys R Us right after school. The next week I made sure this girl won a prize and stocked my treasure chest with a brand new teacher and student Barbie set. Well, this child picked the Barbie right away. The most touching part about this story was when she asked if she could show and tell her new Barbie. I said sure. At the beginning of her show and tell she introduced the student Barbie as her name and the teacher Barbie as being my name. I was so touched. 5-year-old girl was crying at the lunch table. I tell her she's going to see her mom soon and it's okay. I don't know her very well at this point. She goes, "My mom's in jail." So I quickly go, "Your dad?" And she goes, "He's in jail." 2. Her twin sister says, "We live with our grandma." I'm about to cry at this point, so I ask if they need anything. Can I get them anything? They ask for candy. I always carry caramels in my purse because these are safe candies and the kids love them and know I have them. I gave them each a handful of caramels and sat with them until their grandma came an hour later. We colored together. They each saved caramels for their grandma. I'll never forget those two little girls. I taught a student that had intellectual disabilities. For example, I had a test question that was, who is the founder of Buddhism? And the choices were me, the principal, the assistant principal, and the correct answer. He came back from his accommodation room and said I chose you for
Rack
the
and
last
ruin.
question and didn't understand why that was bad. Admin had called him in to discuss things with him before, and talking to him never led to anything because it was like
You
having
can't run!
peace. One morning while walking to class he said, "Hey Mom, too fungy in here." This
Judgment!
morning my poppy tried to choke me, threw me on the ground, and took my phone. But don't tell anyone.
Back off!
Okay? I swear it was like a different kid was
I
talking
condemn
because
you.
it was so focused and direct. Luckily CPS and possibly the police got involved.
More speed.
I tutored Chinese children on. Some of them got sent to
Eye for an
private
eye.
boarding schools when they hit middle school. Most did 3-4 hours of homework
You
and
can't
night
run.
classes Saturday and Sunday. One boy is 11 years old. When I ask what he does,
Punishment!
his
Judgment!
only response is homework. He doesn't play video games or watch
I
TV.
condemn you!
His parents force him to study and read all day, every day. The only time he plays with other children is when they eat lunch or half-day class. I have some other students like this. They know that. Some of my kids are taught that the cinema is a waste of time. Video
Eye for
games
an
and
eye.
cartoons are bad and they need to study all weekend to get into a good university. The children can be like zombies. It is difficult sometimes seeing them have no joy. One girl said the highlight of her week was that she didn't get assigned a lot of homework this weekend. One young man who had stains around markings on his arms I couldn't figure out. Looked a little bit like vaccine scars. Figured maybe some scarification thing from his culture I didn't know about. Live in a melting pot country. We had a pretty good relationship. So I asked him. No. Cigarette burns from when he was a baby that had grown up with him. Not a teacher but a student. I was absent a lot but always handed him an excuse note the next day. One day he came to me with all of them and told me that none of the signatures matched and therefore had to be forged somehow. I told him it was because sometimes my mom was really tired when I get her to
You
sign
can't
it.
run!
In reality, sometimes she was too tired to hold a pen and could barely scratch her name for me. Anyway, by the end of the school year,
Eyes
it
on
was
me!
very obvious to all my
Vengeance
teachers that
will
my
be
mother
mine.
had a drug problem.
I condemn you!
And when he took his group to the office, they informed
As
me
a good
that
night,
my
Sean.
mother had called in every one of my absences. He apologized the next day. Not a teacher, but I remember from high school. I told a friend I was proud of him for his work outside of school. He stood up and thanked me because he hadn't been told someone was proud of him. I imagine that he couldn't remember another time.
Rack and
Also, his
ruin!
dad was a real PT to him. So he'd never been told that. That hit
Not
me
bad.
right in the feels and I don't think I'll ever forget it. One of my best students in one class showed up late after I had a slow of students rolling
Steady.
in late and I had said there would be consequences for the next ones. I walked over to talk to him and he almost started crying. So we stepped outside and I angled him away from the class and asked what was up. Turns out he had been kicked out of the house, living in his car. His phone had died and that was his alarm. And he felt terrible about being late. I told him that I was so proud of him for making it into class. And I was going to make
I'll
angry
catch up.
faces and make it look like I was once over class didn't think I was going back on my word. But
I
that he
condemn
was
you.
awesome and could take a
Rack
few
and
minutes
ruin.
to collect himself and
You
join
can't
us
run.
when he was ready. I think I even waved my arms in the air a bit to ham it up. That dude aced my
Leave it
class.
up.
He was amazing.
Hi there. Look, if you enjoyed the video, why not go ahead, hit that like and subscribe to Reddit Stories. In fact, if you want to see even more...
Wait a minute. Wait a minute. What? Shut the fuck up.
To all of the shy guys out there, how did you get a girlfriend? Was sitting in second day of the class in college. Class had 100 plus students. I like to get there early to reserve my seat. Was a very shy guy and my row was always empty except one, which I didn't mind at all. Anyways, I was sitting there, and I look over at the far door to watch the students pile up. A girl, obviously on the tennis team, walks in. Tennis. I look at her. She looks at me. I look away because I didn't want to be awkward. Next thing I know, she's right next to me and asks if the seat next to me is taken. It isn't. She sits down. I don't know what to do, but I have to do something. Look over and say I'm Benesapet. What's your name? And put my hand out. Immediately regret the decision, because maybe a handshake is too formal. She awkwardly shakes it and gives me her name. I ask how long she's been playing tennis. She doesn't. She's on the golf team, not the tennis team. Feel like a dumbass but keep trying. She asks a couple of questions about me. I had just got back from living in France for a couple of years. I'm half French. And tell her. She's impressed and asks me to say a couple things in French. More impressed. Class starts. She mentions how she'll need a study buddy to get through this. I catch on. Tell her we should make a study group. She's all for it. I get her number to set the group up. Class ends. We go our separate ways. Next day of BO. I get to class a little later than usual. Walk in. She's in her old spot. She saved my spot. I'm on cloud 9 and never miss a day of BO. We start studying together before exams. Then we start studying together every day. I have a I take her out. Every now and
Power
then.
that ended
She
high
invites me hiking
as a
a
dutiful
mountain.
maid would.
Just me and her. We go up the mountain to a spot that overlooks the city. She plays my favorite song by Blues Traveler. That's when I fall in love. Ask her out on the hike down. She says yes. First kiss. 2 years later we are still together. Sounds incredible, man. That superhero name doesn't roll off the tongue too well.
I condemn you.
She apparently hit on me a lot. And eventually got mad and was
Blood of
do you
frost.
just not like me or what?
Rack and ruin.
I eventually
Shut up.
stammered out and
More
apology
speed.
and asked her to hang out for Christmas. We'd tolerated each other for 6 years this Christmas lol. And eventually got mad and was like, do you just not like me or what? I eventually stammered out and apology. I didn't realize that protagonists existed in real life.
You can't run.
TFW second was really wrong. Oh thank Christ. Well, my last girlfriend
I
was a friend
condemn
I
you.
had a crush on. We were playing the dot game, which is where you try to tap the other person's nose and say dot. It leads to a lot of wrestling. If you're playing on a couch, I had her pinned down.
Rack and
we were
ruin.
both laughing.
Touche.
Then I just kissed her. Lucky for me. She was thinking just kiss me already or else that would have been bad. If you're at the dot game stage, kissing is almost guaranteed. My BF is more introverted than shy. He and my brother worked together, and my brother asked him to help move a big piece of furniture. He stayed for dinner. We talked and then I asked him out. He's held on to me tight ever since. 3 Basically he did someone a favor and got dinner and a girlfriend out of it. Basically you did all the work and he's lucky. Lol yeah edit. Thank you. When I was 19, one of my extrovert friends hooked me up with another introvert I never would met otherwise. We started off exchanging emails. We lived 200 miles apart. This was in 2005. Before smartphones with video chat. Before video chat was really even a thing. I had no idea what she even looked like. Our 8th anniversary is Monday, and we are taking the kids to dinner and a movie to celebrate. Did you find out how she looks like? We are still too shy to look. Asked her out over MySpace. Fucking MySpace. She inexplicably said yes, and we've been together since. Well, MySpace was a thing. I met my boyfriend through MySpace. October 31st is our 10-year anniversary. My current BF is as shy as they come. He won me over by approaching me at a college mixer and just smiling and nodding while I blabbered on and on about the James A. Garfield assassination. Sometimes listening is all you need. Close bracket. A little bit of alcohol helps me become a bit more social. So that helps. Slightly less than 2 drinks. I didn't get her. She got me. She went up to me and said, "You're my boyfriend now," and since I'm too shy to say yes or no, I went with it. We have been dating for 6 years now. Kindergarten. Them days. I wish there was a way to know you're in the good old days before you've actually left them. I went through a 2-year period where I became pretty normal. I met her and got married during that time. I was sociable for some reason I don't understand. After we got married I kind of went back to my old self. This answer is probably not much help. Just broke up with my GF of 6 years. We met because I was making a conscious effort to be social after graduating high school. Unfortunately, I too reverted back to being antisocial and now I'm single again. You are a lucky man that she has stuck with you equals. For me, the trick was to be cool with being alone. I found my happiness, worked on improving myself, and eventually women started noticing me. There is definitely something to the confidence is sexy thing. I guess my advice is, live your life and don't obsess about being single. Also, going to the gym helps because the better you think you look the more confidence you project. I played the long con. Knew her for like 7 years. Visited her on a job interview, late November. Moved up to her like 2 weeks later, and married in March. That was 5 years ago, and now we have a 6-week-old daughter. It's been a busy few years. I'm awkward as hell, and I just told dumb jokes to make her laugh. I was always there for her, and we went out on a date up to a lake and just talked most of the night. We've been dating ever since. So my advice is just be yourself. She made me so much more confident in myself, and the past year and a half has flown by. First one, she ended up liking me for some reason, and it was pretty obvious. She ended up confessing first. So yay me. For a while. Then not so yay. Second one, Tinder. Grab it because I don't go out at all, and there's no other way for me to really meet people.